The news of Russian President V. Putin's readiness for negotiations with French leader E. Macron has caused active discussion. Experts note that behind the openness to negotiations lie Russia's increasingly obvious demographic limitations. Demographics are becoming the most important but often underestimated factor determining Russia's military and geopolitical potential today. As of 2021, the population of Russia was about 146 million people. According to UN forecasts, by 2030, this figure will decrease to 143 million, and by 2050 to 126 million. However, the most difficult part of the issue is not the total population size, but the age structure of men, which determines the mobilization potential. In 2020, on the eve of the war, the number of men aged 35 to 39 was approximately 6 million. Those aged 30 to 34, 6.3 million. Those aged 25 to 29, 4.6 million. And those aged 20 to 24, only 3.6 million. These figures are not forecasts, but rather a reality, indicating that Russia has already entered a phase of a sharp decline in the number of men who can be mobilized. Seen from this perspective, claims about Russia's ability to conquer Europe on a large scale sound more like propaganda than cold-blooded analysis. For a country with a shrinking population but a territory of 17 million square kilometers, the main strategic challenge is not to capture new territories, but to maintain control over existing ones. That is why demographic concerns are increasingly evident in the statements of the Russian leadership. In modern Russian military doctrine, man is no longer considered an expendable resource as it was in Soviet times. On the contrary, it has become a rare and strategically important asset. This limitation explains why the invasion of Ukraine began with about 120,000 troops. Although the Russian leadership seriously underestimated the resistance in Ukraine, a strategy of slow-paced battles and the preservation of manpower was chosen from the very beginning of the war. The active use of Chechen units and private military formations, as well as gradual and cautious mobilization, all this is a direct result of demographic pressure. This approach was especially clearly manifested in the fall of 2022. In conditions of unfavorable balance of forces, Russian troops abandoned part of the Kharkiv region and preferred to retreat to the left bank of the Dnieper River without major battles. This decision demonstrated the priority of preserving manpower over territorial ambitions. Thus, the current diplomatic activity of Paris and the openness of Moscow to negotiations coincide. It is not a question of initiative or weakness, but of real resources. After the collapse of the USSR, the Russian elites clearly understood that it was impossible to continue the long-term confrontation with the demographically superior NATO indefinitely. Thus, today's Russia is not an expansionist state, but a country operating in conditions of demographic contraction. Both the signal for negotiations and Europe's cautious acceptance of it are taking place against these objective limitations.